Okay, so welcome. And for those of you online, welcome. So I can't quite believe it that we have together, or some of us all together, have been traversed 6 weeks of exploring this image. So yeah, we're going to try to complete or kind of bring to a conclusion this exploration tonight. What I'm really going to try to do tonight is talk about the wheel of life, and particularly about what we describe as the gap, this kind of key teaching of Bhante's, and how by exploring the gap in our own experience, this creating the gap actually establishes the conditions for transforming the wheel into the Buddha Mandala. So I'm going to explain that process in the next half an hour or so. So I realise I've sort of, as ever, bitten off quite a big chunk to try to work with, but this is my way. And, let's see where we can get with it. So, I'll sit down. Oh, God. Okay, so right at the heart of this image, it sits avidya, or ignorance. So this ignorance is arising within the hub at this very center of the image. And out of these forces of avidya, or ignorance, what arises out of that is these forces which we are pictured as the cock, the snake, and the pig. So this is the starting point of this wheel of life, which we started looking at 6 weeks ago. So just going to say avidya, what does this actually mean? So the prefix a, actually all it means is not. And vidya is to see or to know. So avidya simply means to not see or to not know things as they truly are. And this avidya, this not seeing things as they really are, give rise to these 3 marks, the 3 marks of deluded seeing, or deluded knowing. So we have the delusion of separate selfhood. It's a technical term, anatta, we need to know. But so we have the delusion of separate selfhood, the delusion of permanence, and the delusion of finding ultimate satisfaction in conditioned existence. So what we're trying to do through this image and through what we describe as a spiritual life, I prefer our human life, is to release these veils of deluded seeing or knowing. So we're simply trying to free ourselves from this sense of separate selfhood, permanence, and the fantasy that we will be able to find ultimate satisfaction in this conditioned world. So we're trying to do this work of release. And we're doing it because the Buddha is suggesting that it's these veils of avidya that is maintaining the core driving forces which are creating suffering for ourselves and others. So the path or the goal of Buddhist practice can be pictured as a release from avidya into vidya, or clear seeing, clear knowing. And in some traditions, vidya is also translated as non-dual awareness. So I suggest that clear seeing and knowing of non-duality is the wisdom whose natural reflex is love. We really see clearly into the wisdom of non-duality. Out of that seeing, quite naturally arises love. So the significance of this is at the very heart of the wheel of life sits avidya, but within and beneath, behind avidya, sits obscured, sits unexpressed, is this immanent reality of love. So actually, as I started with 6 weeks ago, my suggestion is that actually at the heart of this image is actually behind all these veils, behind this obscurations, is love. Love trying to manifest. So I'm kind of aware this is quite trying to jump quite a number of steps quite quickly. So I'm just going to say, lay that out again, because I really want you to kind of keep up with this kind of framework, because it feels important to me to get this across. So avidya, or ignorance, establishes the marks of deluded perception. So what that means is that we see permanence where there is only impermanence. And we see separate selfhood where there is only interdependent arising. And we see satisfaction in objects and experiences that are ultimately unreliable and unstable. So the path of the Buddha Dharma is to transform or purify avidya and its manifestations into vidya, this clear seeing or knowing, which is expressed and lived out as love. So when the delusion of separate selfhood is seen through and released, when we really see know this truth of the interflowing, interweaving flow of life, we naturally discover this truth of interconnectedness. Empathic connection is naturally established simply by letting go of the sense, or the deluded sense, of separate selfhood. It gives us the possibility, the potential of vibrating in sympathy with all life. So each life weaves into the other, creating this infinite, interpenetrating web. And seeing this love then flows out of an unbounded sense of abundance. So by connecting to this sense of interdependence, interweaving, we meet this abundance. In interconnectedness, life is boundless. It's infinite expressions of love, reflecting, refracting, and multiplying towards and out of every appearance. It's weaving into and out of all these manifestations of life, illuminating every being without exception. And when the delusion of permanence is released, change can be embraced, because nothing is fixed, so transformation becomes possible. And knowing this, spontaneous expressions of gratitude, kindness, generosity, and delight can multiply and flourish. And love can naturally flow out of this real meeting or releasing from this delusion of permanence. And as I've said earlier in the series, the demon of impermanence that grasps this spinning wheel of life becomes a guardian angel, an ally, not a threat. So when impermanence is embraced, creativity can flow. Apparent, immovable challenges will change, and those frozen, unlived places within us can begin to breathe and receive the flow of blood from the heart of love. So that's separate selfhood and its delusion of permanence. And when the delusion of finding ongoing pleasure in conditioned experience is released from, equanimity, acceptance, patience, and unshakability can arise. They naturally will arise. The deep stillness and the majesty that is unshaken by the worldly winds of praise and blame, gain and loss, fame and disrepute, pain and pleasure. By allowing ourselves to be unshaken, establishing this deep unshakability allows a rich reservoir of love to bubble up through our being and meet all that arises in experience with an open heart. So this is this vision of Vidya, and I'm going to try to bridge this vision of the arising of clear seeing with the teachings from last week on the chain of conditioned co-production. So I'm going to be suggesting that the aim of the spiritual life is to create sufficient space within and around our relational experience so that love can then quite naturally flow and manifest through and within arising experience. So this creation of spaciousness, or what is commonly described as the gap, is one of Sangharakshita's key teachings. It's a really positive message that is carried within the rather, what I find rather dry and abstract teaching, looking at the 12 links of conditioned co-production, which I went through last week. So hopefully you'll remember this teaching around the 12 links, that this outer rim of the wheel here describes these processes of conditioned co-production through which all beings arise and pass into and out of the 6 realms of existence. And this outer rim describes how karmic causes and the confluence of conditions give rise to what we perceive as our world. And what I suggested last week was that we all live in a unique universe. So we have 6 realms pictured, but actually, of course, there are infinite universes, as many universes as there are human beings. So there may be some commonality of experience, but each of us here, sitting here, each of you sitting online, will be experiencing these words, this meeting, in your own particularly unique way. There are endless interpretations, infinite views and judgments appearing and dissolving, through which we are knowing ourselves, each other, and this amazing world. So without the potential of the gap, we would simply be spinning endlessly within this wheel of life, this wheel of suffering. We'd be creating ever deeper ruts of being, leading us deeper and deeper into kind of a fixed suffering state. So the gap, this wondrous thing, is what makes possible freedom, liberation. It's the primary means of transformation and purification. So if you hear nothing else tonight, if you're already beginning to zone out or go to sleep or think about something else, I'd just like you to really pay attention to this next paragraph that I'm going to read to you. And then I don't really mind what happens next, but I'd really like you to pay attention to this next bit. Okay, so when you're in a situation where you notice that your mind or your body has gripped around a particular experience, a particular exchange, a particular view that's been expressed, or a particular image that you can't escape from, wherever you find yourselves feeling pain or discomfort or anger, or feeling like a rabbit in headlights, frozen, unable to move, can you recall the invitation to consciously relax your mind and body? Broaden your perspective. Can you pick up this invitation to create some sense of space, no matter how small, around whatever it is that you are feeling? It's this simple and yet radical act of self-kindness, self-care, that will have an unimaginably important and liberating effect on your life. Making conscious the grip and then creating space around and within experience is the key means to open into and soften towards clear seeing, clear knowing, and the freedom that that brings. So the teaching of the gap really is that simple, and yet so easily forgotten. It's this crucial thing: we create the space, and that space allows that lock, that grip, that bind to begin to release.
How long do you stay in the gap?
I'll say more about that. So what I'm going to do right now is to say a little about how to work to create and deepen into this precious gap as a lived experience. And I'll then describe how through that, creating that gap, it allows us to stand openly and curious within our actual experience. Because it's this open curiosity towards our experience, which is constantly changing, which actually purifies and transforms the wheel of life into the beauty of the Buddha Mandala. So it's this paying attention to our actual experience, creating space around the experience. It allows it to transform, to purify. So the Buddha Mandala is the symbolic expression of a mind clearly seeing and imbued with metta. So the Buddha Mandala is the manifestation or the embodiment of the mystery of love. The Buddha Mandala reveals what happens as we become acclimatized to live in this gap and dissolve the self-created boundaries of the wheel that hold our life force above and disembodied from the river of life and death in which we are all swimming. So there's this question: how long do we live in, or how do we stay, how do we live in the gap? How long do we stay in that space? But let's just reel back just one step. So just to be specific about where this gap actually manifests. So to do that, we have to go back to the 12 links. And so within the chain of conditioned co-production, we have, dependent on this body with its 6 senses out of this body gives rise with its six senses to contact. We have contact with appearances arising and passing internally and externally. And in dependence on contact, feelings arise. So we can't stop this process happening. Because we're embodied human beings with the six senses, we have contact with this, with appearances, and out of that, feelings arise. So feelings in this sense is simply the response to the sensation which we experience as simply painful, pleasurable, or indifferent. So it's not talking about emotions, it's this very raw, visceral sense of pain and pleasure. Dependent on these feelings, then craving arises. That is, we want that particular sensation of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, or thought to continue or to end. And it's this particular phase of transition from feeling to craving is actually the key. This is the transitional space between feeling, in the sense of this simple response to pain, pleasure, and the craving that arises in dependence on those feelings. So this is where we need that sense of spaciousness and availability to manifest alongside or within that space between feeling and craving. And it's said that this really is the place where the whole of the spiritual life is lived out, between the knowing of our feelings and our responses to those feelings. That is all there is. That is the kind of the heart of any transformation, the heart of purification, the heart of freedom is in that territory between having the bare, raw experience and our responses to it. So to begin to work to establish this gap, we first have to understand what is creating this link between feeling to craving. And if we look at the image of the wheel, we're reminded that this whole structure is built up within the clasping grip of this apparent demon of impermanence. So within this sense, this unstable flow of experiences described by the wheel is a sense of self that is seeking something that is fixed, permanent, and provides a seamless stream of pleasure. I'm sure you're all familiar with that aspiration. And so this is the dream that we've been pursuing for life after life. This grasping after our particular sense of self-existence, which we forget is actually always under revision. And it gives rise to particular emotional responses to the world around us and within us. So, because we have this sense of self chasing after a particular view of existence, if something arises that confirms or strengthens or even inflates us, therefore it's desirable. So we tend to immediately grasp after it, cling to it, become attached to those experiences with the associated responses of attraction, of ease, of excitement. And if the experiences are undesirable, in that they negate or challenge our sense of self-existence, those sensations and experiences tend to be judged and then repulsed, resisted, pushed away. They're denied because they don't fit the fantasy of our selfhood. So when we begin to address this territory between feeling and craving, we're really entering into the very ground upon which our selfhood is constructed and maintained. So I'm wondering, is it any surprise that when we discover that the Dharma life is a path of letting go, of releasing, not a path to gather towards us to create more and more additional toys to bolster our sense of selfhood, some people unfortunately turn away from the Dharma, back away from the Dharma. Because it's hard work to let go, to really release from a fixed position, a fixed view of ourselves. So it's no surprise, I think, that we have to muster as much support, as much encouragement and understanding from those treading the same path of us to bear this challenge of letting go. So it's no surprise that Sangha becomes such a crucial necessity for us to be able to embark on this work of liberation. We need each other to support each other, to move into the gap, to develop the capacity to live in the gap. So how do we develop this capacity to enter into the gap? So I think the first thing we have to do is to develop the capacity to be able to honestly see and know our experience as it's arising. That is, we have to create this stability so that we're not washed away by craving our experience to be in any particular way. And this, of course, is the territory of the mindfulness of breathing, and perhaps even more so, the practice of just sitting. So we patiently develop this muscle of non-judgmental awareness, to simply be present to what is arising here and now. And within mindfulness, within this quality of attention, what is particularly important is this sense of connection to our bodily experience. Because unfortunately, the conceptualizing mind is really great at talking our way out of our actual experience, out of the sensations of our body. But as the famous book title goes, the body keeps the score. It's immediate. It tightens and grips or softens and releases without the mediation of the conceptualizing mind. So the body is a really important territory to let us know when our selfhood is being challenged or reinforced, when we're gripping or softening and reveling in some sort of pleasurable reinforcement. So the second capacity that we're looking for to step towards freedom is metta. The unconditional welcoming of actual experience as it becomes into awareness is the foundation from which we build this gap. So metta is the vital quality of the internal atmosphere that facilitates this emergence of the gap. So my thesis at the start of this series was that love is trying to manifest in the world. So we're all looking to be met by love, to be seen, to be known, to be welcomed, to be blessed. And likewise, we're looking to find safe ways to reveal the love that we have for others without it being misunderstood ridiculed or diminished. So all this work, this capacity begins with how we approach our own experience. So the transformation begins with this opening into a kind, aware space within us. It starts with self-knowledge, if only the knowledge of our internal judges, our critics and tyrants, grappling for control of our life. But the path of purification and transformation begins by knowing fully what is actually alive right here and now, in us here, rather than what we think should be here or what our preference would be to be here and now. So this path of purification is very much engaged with the actuality of experience. So the gap grows out of meeting our experience with love just as it is, and then working out from there to include a sense of spaciousness. Maybe the simple feeling of knowing the reality of the space behind us, or the space that's present at the end of the out-breath. These are very simple and direct invitations into this felt experience of the gap. And this simple inclusion of space around and within experience really is the basic alchemical ingredient of transformation. So what is transformed? So we transform our limited perspective, our grip. We transform that grip and what are described as the poisons that establish and maintain the 6 realms of deluded being. So this transformation of the poisons, transformation of the energy, means that nothing should be rejected or banished. It simply needs to be seen clearly and allowed to flow back into alignment with reality. But I think it's just a very important point. The poisons are there to be transformed, not banished. So that little bit of presentation is prepared, and now we go into a more open space where I try to take us through this journey from the poisons into the wisdoms of the Buddha Mandala. But before I do that, actually I should just answer this question that was asked earlier on about how long or how do we stay in that gap. I think my sense is that the gap isn't something that where experience stops. It's actually just something that we weave into our ongoing experience. Sensations, experiences are going to come and go the whole time. We can't control, we can't stop that flow of experience. So all we can do is try to bring space and awareness to that flow of experience. And it's that relationship between the awareness within the experience as it moves, as it passes, that is where the transformation takes place. Because we begin to see the qualities and the direct experience as it grows, as it manifests, but also it shows us the way that it is actually something which is fluid and changeable, that we don't have to grip onto it and become over-identified with it. That experience is simply energy that has taken a particular shape, and the more we can bring attention to the qualities of that experience, it can release back into its natural state. And this work of recognizing what is present, being with it, creating space around it, is this work of transformation. So if for those of you online, there should be a screen share available coming up now. And for those of you here in the room, we've got a little sheet. Here those, pass those along. So you've got one up there. Okay, so I've no idea whether this is going to make any sense, but I thought, I'll give it a shot. So it feels important that we recognize that, we're talking about that the 6 realms really are a manifestation of energy taking a particular shape because of a deluded perception of how things really are. So the energies of these realms are kind of have qualities around them, which each of these realms, if you remember, have a particular emotional tone to them, which are described as the poisons. So each of these 6 realms, we have hatred associated with the hell realm, pride, attachment associated with the human realm. We have greed associated with the hungry ghost realm and the animal realm, envy, the asheras, and ignorance, the realm of the gods. So these are the kind of emotional tones, that poisons, which are giving rise, are the kind of roots of these different realms that we can find ourselves in. So I'm sure all of us will have within us at different times these particular poisons. So what I'm suggesting is that by creating the gap, we move, we transform, we purify these poisons into wisdom. So we don't banish, as I say, we simply try to really look fully into the specific nature of the experience. We create space and get kind awareness, attention on the particular poison that we are with. So I'm suggesting let's just go through them. So this is just my guess at what hatred feels like as a quality. So when I'm experiencing hatred, there's this directed energy. My whole universe, my whole energy system becomes focused onto a single point. That person that needs to be destroyed, that experience that needs to be destroyed. So it's that kind of quality of capacity to really focus very strongly onto a single experience. That is, what a fantastic capacity. Yes, it's hatred, but as a capacity, it's quite something to be able to direct our energy so precisely. But hatred also is a sense of really that energy we just want to banish, we want to destroy, we want to push away. So that sense of becoming isolated, removing ourselves through that act of hatred, we're actually pushing ourselves out of life. We're trying to push away some part of life, and in doing so, we push ourselves away. So to transform that experience, what we're trying to do to really look at that quality of hatred and notice how that energy, we really stay with it, it becomes what's described as mirror-like. We just see us in a state of hatred, we see things so precisely, every detail of that person, that everything that has happened, that is happening in front of us, that is so outrageous, we see that with incredible detail. So we get this mirror-like, or this potential of the mirror-like wisdom arises through really going into the specific nature of hatred. And it's our capacity to just stay with that sharp, precise energy that gives us this sense of being completely unshakable, immovable. In the poison, we're completely focused on the object. And in the wisdom, we're completely unshakable in our engagement, our connection to experience. So this is something that we probably need to explore in our own ways, but I'm just trying to indicate something as we move through this. So we create the gap to stay with hatred, just really look into its qualities. What is actually the quality of hatred? What is actually here? Feel it, allow it to burn into the body as it is, and allow that space around it to allow it to open and reveal its wisdom within it. And this wisdom of the imperturbable is associated with the Buddha figure of Akshobhya. This is Akshobhya, the deep blue Buddha, whose name means the imperturbable. So this is the first transformation that we have available to us by entering into the gap. So the second realm is that of the human realm. Now, as I look at this, I think, oh dear, I've actually got this wrong, so I'm sorry about that. But anyway, we'll go with it. It's good enough. It's an example. But actually, the poison of the human realm is actually attachment, as I know you would point out to me very soon. But luckily, so just to say that, so this isn't quite right. But hopefully, you'll get the gist of where I'm trying to go with this. The gist is that we have these experiences that actually, if we stay with them and explore them and really enter into them fully, then by doing that, we establish the wisdom that brings us fully into love. So pride as a state, we will know, probably. We know about pride. It's kind of slightly pumped up, but there's a kind of brittleness to that. It's kind of slightly fragile. It's not really got any guts to it in some ways. It's certainly always in relation to something outside of ourselves. So it's a kind of splitting of our experience. It's evaluating our experience into something which is beyond us. And that splitting leads to a sense of being ungrounded. We kind of lose ourselves by, in the same way, to some extent, that the other poison of hatred, because we become ungrounded, then we're unable to really, we kind of get lost in the other. The object of pride becomes that which we are kind of wanting to become, wanting to inflate ourselves through this sense of, I am this. Isn't this wonderful? So the way that we work with pride is actually, yes, we have these particular qualities that are wonderful and fantastic, But actually, when we look around us, we see that, well, so does others around us have these same qualities. So from being lifted up out of the world in some way through pride, we're brought back through the wisdom of sameness. This is the wisdom of Ratnasambhava that sees that on a core level or a base level, there is this sense of non-difference. But just as I have these qualities, then each of you have particular qualities also. But there's a sort of a communality in our humanity. And this is the wisdom of Ratnasambhava. And Ratnasambhava is the jewel producing, the yellow Buddha. So everything has this common capacity to become illuminated, to become fully itself, but in connection with all others. Okay, so I'm sorry, I don't feel that was completely congruent, and to be honest, I was working on this as I was confessing to the team. I actually only finished this 2 minutes before I was due to come to the centre to do this talk. So it's probably needed a bit more thought, but I hope you'll get the gist of where I'm going with it, and that it is, well, I feel there's something important here, and I hope it really brings together really why the Buddhas are present in each of these realms. The realms are transformed through the Buddhas. The kind of qualities that are brought to each of the realms actually support the transformation of the poisons. So let's have a look with that proviso. Then we're going to move on to looking at the poison of greed. So, of course, greed is probably familiar to us as existing in the hungry ghost realm, the Preta realm, the realm of addiction, but also the realm of the animal realm, where that sort of base needs for just security, sex and food are met, and nothing else is that important. So greed, the problem with greed is that we get lost in distractedness, we get absorbed in the objects of our attraction, that which draws us. And we don't really meet, or we find it difficult to really meet the space, the gap that we're trying to fill inappropriately. So greed tends to cover over the unmet need, the unexpressed longings. So this is, we get lost in the distracted states over there, the objects of our attention, but we lift out of ourselves, out of this capacity to really know the depths of what is driving this particular poison. So as we open into the gap, then what happens is that we can start to see more clearly, we can discriminate between the kind of the objects, the poison of chasing after something which actually doesn't give us satisfaction. It doesn't mean that we don't chase after anything. We actually need passion for the Dharma life. We need that drive to embrace that which is in accord with our deepest values. But we have to discriminate between what is helpful, what supports our values, what helps us live out our values, and those things which simply drag us away, lift us out, encourage us into distractedness. And this realm, or the realm of that is the antidote the kind of purification of greed is the realm of Amitabha. And Amitabha is really the epitome of love, the red light of love. So this is greed, and from greed we go to envy. So the envy is the Ashura realm. If you remember, the Ashuras are trying to cut down the tree of knowledge. They're kind of chopping away at that which they just want to grasp without actually doing the work to bring into being the real values, the real, the benefits, the kind of clarity, the openness of a well-lived life. So the Ashuras, through envy, they're looking up, they're idealistic. And there's a sense of, again, this sense of lack within them, but also this sense that they're reaching beyond where they actually are. So there's an unwillingness to actually do the work. The poison means that it's sort of showing that we kind of, because we're looking over there, so we have, for instance, the ideals of a Buddha, the enlightened Buddhist. We look over there for how it should be. We're envious of how it should look, how it should be. And in doing that overreaching of ourselves, we forget or we lose contact with actually where we are already. And that this, where we are, is utterly sufficient. That envy is simply a recognition of the values that we wish for, that we long for, but which we are overreaching to try to reach outside of ourselves rather than settling back into our current experience. So the more we can settle back into ourselves and recognize that everything we need is right here, we come into what's called the wisdom, the all-accomplishing wisdom. So we don't need anything that isn't already here. Everything we need to accomplish our goal is right here. This experience now is sufficient. And this is the realm of the Moga Siddhi, whose name means unobstructed success. There's the green Buddha. And finally, ignorance. We've already talked about the ignorance, avidya. And this is the realm of the gods, and the qualities of this kind of root poison is that we find ourselves so easily distracted. We find ourselves so easily drifting, so easily groundless in just a boundless space. So the more we really enter into that open space that appears as a poison, but do that with awareness, what happens? Well, it said we enter into the space of the Dharma Dhatu. That is the space of, another term for Dharma Dhatu is the space of non-duality. We continue to explore the poison of this kind of distracted, groundless spaciousness, but do that with awareness. That transformation will lead us towards this open space of non-duality. So this is the realm of Varochana, the realm of what's called the Illuminator. That's his title, the title of the Buddha of this realm. And the white Buddha that sits at the heart of the Buddha Mandala. So that is a little exploration of this movement from the realms, the 6 realms of the Wheel of Life, into the 5 figures on the Buddha Mandala. It's the transformation of this deluded turning sphere based in ignorance into the non-dual awareness of love manifesting in the Buddha Mandala. So that's all I'm going to say. So that's where we've got to.